Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today we are talking about pendant lights. So now, as I've mentioned before, these are something that is kind of no longer really an option. Of course, things are optional, but this is a great place that people are making not only, task lighting choices, but really truly a design and decor statement in their kitchen. So these pendant lights I'm talking about today are specific to over your kitchen island. If you do have one and you've been wondering, should I put them up? How many? How do I measure? What do I do? This is going to go over a couple of different pieces there. First up is going to be kind of the logistics of, how do you measure? How do you figure out how many? How do you know the placement? All of that. And then 2 is going to go a little bit more into the new build aspect. So I know that when we sat down with our builders, that was definitely something that we wanted to do. And it was something that we had to pick out kind of then and there of how many, but we didn't really talk placement, and that kind of made us run into a couple of issues recently. So I want to go over the issues that I did face and how we are working on them now, how I'm trying to get those fixed before the house is set. So if you are in the new build category, make sure you do stay till that part. It was not something I was expecting to have to deal with, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised anymore with kind of what can pop up, these little things that can go wrong, big things that can go wrong too. But for something like this that is going to mean so much, that I've been taking a lot of time to pick out the perfect pendant light, I want to make sure they're going to look right. So if that is something you're interested in, go ahead, give this video a like. Let's jump on in. There's a lot to go over. So first things first is probably how many is really truly going to work for your kitchen. Now again, if you do have a kitchen island, I know that this is something that not everybody does have, but you might have a little bar space or something like that where this could work too. We really want to measure out that island. So you want to take not only the length, but also the width here. Basically, a tape measure is going to be one of your best friends throughout this process. I'm also going to mention painter's tape and wrapping paper, interestingly enough, but we'll get into those other ones later. Now, if your kitchen island is 8 feet or less, we're probably looking at about 2 pendant lights. Now, if you think back to, the late 90s, early 2000s, that Tuscan kitchen trend really comes to mind. These small pendant lights were really something that everybody wanted. Now we look at them today, we are going in completely the opposite direction. We are going for these big statement pieces. They are over the top in some cases, they are beautiful, and we're just really going in this kind of bigger is better direction. So if you still like those smaller ones, you can certainly fit 3 on a kitchen island that is 8 feet or less. It's not something I would advise just because it does look very, very dated already. And again, it just kind of brings me back to that, early 2000s kitchen that it looks old-fashioned right now, and it just might not make the statement that you're looking for. And now, if your kitchen island is larger than 8 feet, say 10 feet is probably where you really want to start looking at doing 3. You can certainly do 2 and have those really big, gorgeous, oversized ones. We just want to think about measurement and placement a little bit more. But those larger islands can really support 3. Now, if as we're going through all of these measurements are too much, you can also just put one up and have a linear light fixture. They make some that kind of mimic the appearance of 2 or 3 or even more. So that's always an option for you too. A little bit easier to measure there. Typically, decor and design is going to say something around the rules of 3. Basically, our eye is drawn a little bit more to sets of 3 rather than sets of 2. That being said, again here, if you are really drawn to those bigger statement pieces like I am, then 2 is going to work. When we're talking about placement of these, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. First thing is you want to make sure that it is about 6 inches in from the sides of your countertop. This gives those pendant lights a little bit of breathing room. You don't want them sitting directly on or definitely not over the edge of that. So bringing them in a little bit off each side, again, 6 inches is kind of that minimum. If you can go, say 12 inches, it might be a little bit better. It will just depend on the overall look and aesthetic that you're going for. Now, what are some easy ways to do this? What you can do if you are going for those 2 pendant lights is you can measure off your countertop, divide it into 4 sections, and then the center of those pendants will go over that kind of 1 and 3 lines. So if you have your entire countertop, you have it divided into 4 sections, that's going to give you 3 different lines. Now from there, again, you'll have the one down the center, and then you can use the other 2 lines to really pinpoint the center of where that pendant light could rest. And then you would just make sure that, again, it has enough room on either side and that you do have some spacing in between. If we're looking at 3 pendants, then one is obviously going to go right in the center, and then you can divide that other section up into 2, and again, that's going to go on the center there. You want your pendant lights to be at least 24 inches apart, but generally 30 to 32 inches tends to be a little bit better. Now we'll go into that. I am, of course, going to break a rule immediately. But if you are a little bit short on space, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with how our pendant lights will end up being hung, at least the width of one of your pendant lights. So we're going with 20-inch pendants, and I'll show you a picture right here of the ones that we are going for. They should get here tomorrow, and I will definitely show you. I'm so excited to see them. So making sure for us that it's at least that 20 inches between the 2 is kind of what we're going to be working with. Now, when you're hanging a pendant light, it's not only about the width spacing, but also you have to think about the height. How high above the countertop do you need to go? Generally, we're looking at 30 to 32 inches up to 36 inches above the top of the counter. So that is from the very top of the counter up to the bottom shade of that pendant light. If you do have taller ceilings, so we do have 10-foot ceilings on the first floor, you can kind of play with that a little bit more. You also want to think about the height of the average person in your household. If your entire family is over 6 feet tall, you probably want to play with that height a little bit more. So we definitely don't want to look across the kitchen and have that light bulb directly in anybody's line of sight. Having a light right to the eyeball, generally not a great idea. This can also depend on what type of pendant you're going for. If you have one of these more open designs, if you can see through the pendant, then you can get away with going a little bit lower, again, as long as the light bulb isn't directly in somebody's line of sight. And then if you have one of these solid ones that you cannot see anything through, you might want to go a little bit higher just to make sure you have a great line of sight through your kitchen. Now, these measurements are all kind of in that ideal world. This is something that there are so many different websites, different infographics that they have out there that really display this. I'll make sure to post a bunch here throughout the video. I'll link a couple below. But what happens when you're in a new build situation and things don't go exactly according to plan? So now we're moving into kind of that new build specific and some of the issues I've run into. Hopefully these can help you out too. So as I had mentioned, when we were in the design center, I knew absolutely that we wanted 2 pendant lights over the kitchen island. It's not a huge island. We're looking at a little bit over 7 by 4. Not to say that that's small by any means, but when we're seeing things like 10, 14-foot kitchen islands, it's a little bit more on the conservative side. So I really wanted to stay away from getting those smaller pendants, so 2 just made sense for the size of the island. Now, the orientation of our kitchen actually had the island initially going one way parallel to the oven. Since we upgraded to the larger one, it shifted it. So now the shorter end is towards the oven and the longer ends are by the fridge and the sink. Now, with rotating that orientation, it kind of offset the lights as well. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but just kind of trusted that people who hang lights kind of know what it is you look for. Now, here's the thing. You can never ever make an assumption. Now, this is not saying anything about the lighting company. It's just that kind of what we like in, the decor realm might not be exactly lined up with how a company running the lines through your house might necessarily think. So the first view here, this was before any flooring cabinets, anything like that went in. This was prior to our pre-drywall inspection. You can see here that they have mapped out about where the cabinets were going to go and about where the pendant lights were going to go. You can see already, this is not ideal. We're looking a little bit off-center. We have one much closer to the center point than the other, and it didn't quite look right. So when I was at the pre-drywall inspection, I made sure to bring this up and I said, hey, I would like these to be centered. I am concerned about where they are right now. Kind of what can we do to address this? Now, looking at the ceiling, what I was told, and this might be different if you're getting a contractor, this might be specific to new builds, this might be specific to my exact builder. So ask questions, make sure that you look around as well. But what I am working with personally is that these pendant lights do need to be attached to the studs here. Some of the can lights, as you can see, they have that kind of bracket, so you can move it left and right along those metal brackets. The pendant lights, not so much. They're attached directly to the stud. So my options here are either left or right of that stud, or you have to move completely out to a new stud. Generally, those are about 16 to 24 inches apart, so that makes a huge difference in the placement. Fast forward, we now have the cabinets in. Still, it's not looking exactly like what I had hoped for, but I also know that I need to see it with the countertop first. So try not to make the decision based off when your cabinets go in. You want to see the countertop. You want to make sure that you're basing it off of the entire picture, not just a piece of it. So finally, we have our countertops in, and now we can start to see it is really not ideal. So we do have one that is off center, but not only that, it's also much more off to one side than another. So basically what I found out is that they based the lighting fixture placement off of where the cabinets were. Now that would be fine if the slab of the countertop were actually just centered completely on the cabinets. That's not the case here. We do have an overhang on one side, which throws off the balance when all the cabinets are here, but then we have an overhang, but all the lights are centered here. You can see that it just doesn't quite work. So what I did is first I went in and measured for the pendants so I could have all of the information before going back to my builder. This is where you're going to need 3 different things. You're going to need painter's tape, a tape measure, and wrapping paper. I found wrapping paper to be easiest. You could use whatever really, but if you have wrapping paper with the grid on the back, I just found that to be a little bit more helpful. So I knew that the pendant lights we were looking at were 20 inches at the widest point. So here, as you can see, I have the wrapping paper, some left over from the holidays, folded it in half, measured out 10 inches across here, made sure the entire length was 20 inches, folded it again, and then cut out that little circular bit. Now somehow, I'm pretty sure I had convinced myself that I could go ahead and cut a perfect circle. Obviously, I am not that talented. It came out a little bit wonky, but I remeasured everything afterward just to make sure that at least the widest points were at that 20 inches. And even not being that perfect circle, it is close enough. Cut out the second one, did a little bit of a better job here, but still not perfect, it'll do. Now, once we were in the house, I thankfully had my husband here to help because our tape measure is not the most sturdy. But if you did have something either a little bit more sturdy, or if you had something like a laser pointer or something more like that, it might be easier to measure exactly. So we just threw the tape measure all the way up to the ceiling, had them centered where they were on the countertop today. Use a little bit of that blue painter's tape. Again, it comes off without leaving a mark. This stuff is going to be so helpful. You're going to see it in a lot of videos once I start measuring for furniture, so stay tuned for that. But I was able to mark off on the counter exactly where the pendant lights were placed in the ceiling right now. I also marked off where the center of the countertop was so we could really see just how far off that one pendant light was. This also really helps show how close to the sink side it is, and obviously I'd like that to be much more centered on the entire island itself. So having these lines taped out, it also kind of showed me, I know a stud is about 2 inches thick. So it looks here like my best bet is going to be to move one of the pendant light attachments to just the opposite side of that same stud. I'll show you a picture here in just a second. After that, I laid down my little wrapping paper pendant lights, centered them along where the pendant lights will line up eventually, based off some of the corrections that I'll go over in just a second. And here you can see a decent visualization of what they'll look like. Now, I was nervous. 20 inches kind of seems like it's fairly large for a light fixture. I think they're going to look just fine. So this led to the follow-up conversation with my builder. So luckily I had taken pictures and video of basically every step of the process along the way. So what I did is I took a snapshot of this picture here, drew out where I would like it to be placed. So not only did I kind of write it out, but it can be a little bit confusing. I try to explain it as best as possible, but visually is going to be easier. So I attached this picture here too, just so that there is no confusion on where I would like this pendant light to be moved. I also made note that, hey, you guys put it over the center of the cabinets, which is not going to work when you actually look at the full breadth of the slab. So I also would like these moved towards the garage side, toward that refrigerator side, to be centered on the actual quartz countertop itself and not kind of over the cabinets. Now, I was told that shouldn't be an issue. He was actually on site yesterday. I have not spoken to him yet today to kind of confirm everything. So we're going to make sure to do that. But this is one of those reasons why making sure that you are documenting the process along the way is so important. Now, obviously, if I had said, hey, I need this moved to about here, what can you do to assist me? They still would have been able to. So I don't want you to think that if you don't have pictures of, the bare studs of your walls that you're missing out in any way. It just made it a little bit easier for myself to know for my kind of visualizing process and to be as specific as possible when going back for my ask, that we know exactly what's going on. So I will certainly keep you updated. Hopefully all of that works out. And again, if you are getting these placed after the fact, maybe your electrician can have a little bit more wiggle room. Maybe they can use those brackets to make it a little bit more precise to what it is exactly that you're looking for. But sometimes you just have to work with what you're given, and this is what we have to work with right now. So this example is how I'm making kind of the best out of the situation. I think it'll look just fine. If I really wanted to be nitpicky in the future, sure, I could try to change that later. I think it's all gonna work out. So that is everything on those kitchen island pendant lights. I hope you did find something helpful. My goal here is always to save you a little bit of headache and heartache by learning from my mistakes and anything like that that I can share with you to kind of streamline your process. If this did help, go ahead, give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Can't wait to see you in the next video. Until next time. Bye.